Just a quick review of the materials. I'm using my A5 size sketchbook. The pages are 160 GSM. The watercolor brushes are size 2, 7, 6 and 8 and a palette for mixing the colors. I've included the full material list in the description if anyone wants to see them. And I've taped the paper for a clean border and it will keep my painting from warping as I paint. So this is the picture I'm using as a reference. Before starting any painting, it's important to study where the shadows and highlights are going to be and plan out which of the colors to use so that the painting process becomes much easier. Here, most of the highlights are the girl's face, neck and hand. There's a little bit on the background, so the highlighted areas are the main focus point. The background is very blurry, so there's nothing for detailed work. And these are the most darkest part. Most of the darkest part is in the background. The fur and the hair colors is the same, so we can paint the hair and the fox's fur with same shade of paint. For transferring the picture on the paper, I'm using a grid method. As my freehand drawing is not so good, it's always look out of proportion. You can use any method you want, tracing or freehand, whatever you like. I find it easy to use the grid method, so I'm using it. I made a grid on the picture and using it as a reference to sketch out some outline so the proportion is accurate. And here I'm testing out which of the colors I'll be using. I didn't record some of the color swatch, so the first row is going to be used for the background. As most of the background is dark, I mixed a little bit of black with most of the colors, and for highlighted areas I'll be using white. So the next row is for the hair and the fur. As they have similar shades, we can use same mixture of paint for the hair and the fur. And for the skin tone, I'm using lighter colors. To lighten it up more, you can use white gouache. First, I'm placing white gouache to the most highlighted areas, just the face and the neck, so that when I place the shadow colors, I have something to blend with. Otherwise, it will leave harsh edges and it would be difficult to paint. Here, I'm outlining the chin with a darker shade to make it more prominent so that there's some distinction between the chin and the neck. Otherwise, the area will look like a flat surface. So I'm putting some darker tone where the shadows are going to be and mixing some of the white in the paint to lighten up the colors and applying it to the highlighted areas so that the color transition looks natural. Then blending out two different shades so that there's no harsh outline. But painting can be quite difficult with gouache because it can reactivate very easily. If you have too much water on the brush, the paint will just leave off the paper and the painting will become blotchy. The background is quite blurry, there's no details, so I'm using a light consistency of paint to give it a watercolor-like effect and blocking out the areas where the fox is going to be. And here I'm placing black paint on the most shadowed areas. I enjoyed this part most in this painting, and I chose this picture mainly because of the fox. I thought that it looked really cute and I had to paint it. Some weeks ago I painted something similar, but in that picture the subjects were further in the back, so there was little details on the painting. But in this one, fox and the girl is the main focus point. Actually, I'm not following any specific pattern or steps to paint this, so you can see me jumping here and there to paint some areas and fixing up some details. I'm just constantly looking at the reference picture and figuring out along the way which shades of colors to use and where to use it. And here I'm placing some basic colors just to the middle tone to fill out white of the page. I'll put the details after the first layer has dried. With gouache, if you put a second layer while the first one is still wet, you can disturb the first layer, so you won't get the kind of result that you want. So it's better to wait for the first layer to dry. I had this exact same problem with some of my first work, but it can be fixed very easily by adding a second layer after the first layer has dried. The fox's fur and the girl's hair are the same shade of red and orange, so I'm painting them at the same time. And here I'm painting some features on the face. To paint the facial features, I'm using the paint with a watercolor-like consistency so that the features look soft in comparison and can be fixed easily if I make any mistakes. For the shadows above the eyes, I'm using burnt sienna with a little bit of crimson. Before blending, I'm wiping out the brush with a tissue paper to soak up the excess water so that it's slightly damp. Then with the light brush strokes, I'm blending out the edges. If you overwork the same area, it will leave streaks marks on the paper, but it can be fixed easily by putting a second layer after the first one has dried. So I'm putting some darker tone where the shadows are going to be and mixing some white in the same paint to lighten it up. For the highlighted area, I'll be using white paint, but it's going to be more brighter if you can preserve the white of the base. I always paint all over the paper, so I'll be using white gouache later to pull out some highlights. But if you can preserve the white of the base, it's very good. For painting the details on the dress, I mixed the same colors as the first layer, just with less water so that it's slightly darker. And I'm painting the folds as I say in the reference. I love this detailing part very much. I just find it very therapeutic, painting tiny details for hours and hours. But sometimes it can be a bit tedious to paint these tiny details, and it does not always look as you want them to be. Here I'm using burnt sienna with a little bit of crimson and black to paint some texture on the fox to make the illusion of fur. It took me over 2 hours to complete this whole painting, so if you want to paint alone, feel free to pause anywhere you like. And I'm going to upload the real-time painting process soon, so stay tuned for that. And if you're finding this video helpful, hit the like button and subscribe if you're new to this channel. I upload art educational content every week. And the thing I love most about gouache is that I can fix any problem very easily because it's so much opaque. Mainly I painted with watercolor and I picked up gouache recently. Painting process with both medium is quite different. With watercolor, you have to depend on the transparency of the paint, and for the highlights, you have to preserve the white of the base, which is I find very daunting because normally I just paint the whole area. I just can't help it. And with watercolors, there's just a few options to fix your painting if you make any mistakes, so it's not always great for beginners. I'm not saying gouache is better than watercolor. These are just my opinion. I just find it very easy to paint with gouache because I can just put layer after layer until I'm satisfied with how the painting looks. Painting is almost done and I'm just putting some last details. Again, if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe, and thank you so much for watching. See you next time.